We are finally back with Premier League football. Thank the Lord. Though we don't have another international break for quite a while, I'm personally looking forward for some uninterrupted Premier League action, and I think a lot of you are as well. As is tradition, we're going to take a look at my Game Week 12 Premier predictions and see how well I did. As always, you can skip through all parts of this video down below, but anyway, let's jump into it, and we're going to start off with the Saturday fixtures. And Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Tottenham. Now I predicted a 1-1 draw, and it was actually a 2-1 win for Wolves. Spurs' depth issues have come back to bite them, but it started well with visitors, to be fair. Brennan Johnson scored his first Spurs goal within 3 minutes, and they hung on for the vast majority of the game. But that was until Sarabia equalised in the 90+ first minute, which was a class goal, to be fair. Then, in the 90th plus 7th minute, Lemina grabbed the winner. Last minute scenes in the West Midlands, and heartbreak for Tottenham. And then we move on to Manchester United versus Luton Town. Now I predicted 2-1 to United, and it was actually just 1-0. United might have been victorious, but Luton made it a really close affair. Kaminsky made some brilliant saves throughout, and despite United's pressure, Luton still stood firm, having chances of their own as well. They were giving United a good game. Lindelof was the difference maker though, as his goal was the only thing that separated either side. Well, that and the fact that Kenilworth Road is in a much better state than Old Trafford, but that's neither here nor there. And then we move on to Arsenal versus Burnley. Now I predicted 3-0 to Arsenal, and it's actually 3-1. Arsenal returned to winning ways, but Burnley did not make it easy. Trossard opened the scoring in the 45th plus first minute to give the hosts the lead right before the break, and if you want to score a goal, that's probably the best time to do it. Brownhill drew the visitors level, but Saliba was there to put the hosts ahead once again. Zinchenko then added a third with a wonderful scissor kick to really seal it for the Gunners and return them to winning ways. And then we move on to Crystal Palace versus Everton. Now, I predicted a 1-1 draw. It was actually 3-2 to Everton, and it was a 5-goal thrill at Selhurst Park, with the visitors coming out on top. Mikolenko opened the scoring belly a minute in after some awful defensive work from Palace. The hosts then went through to equalise from the spot with Eze. Then Doucouré put Everton ahead once again in the second half. Edouard then put Palace level once again. Doucouré put Everton ahead once again, and for the final time in that match. But yeah, it's crazy. Who knew Everton had the dog in them like that? So, okay, man, that dog might have been put down after what happened to them, but we'll talk about that later. And then we move on to Bournemouth versus Newcastle United. Now I predicted 2-0 to Newcastle, but it's actually 2-0 to Bournemouth. Bournemouth grabbed a big win over Newcastle United that saw them lift out of the relegation zone. Neither side could break the deadlock for the first hour, but it was Dominic Solanke who finally opened the score in the second half after pouncing on an error from Willock. He then doubled Bournemouth's lead shortly after some confusion in the box, and that was that. A very big win for Bournemouth and a very big win for Iraola as well. But Newcastle are definitely suffering from a couple injuries, I guess we could say. And then we move on to the Sunday fixtures, and we're going to start off with Aston Villa versus Fulham. I predicted 3-0 to Villa. It was actually 3-1 to Villa. Villa secured their 13th straight Premier League home win as they comfortably beat Fulham. Villa had plenty of threat going forward, but it was an own goal that put the hosts ahead. McGinn went on to double Villa's lead before the break, and that was that. They were soaring. Watkins added a third in the second half to really seal the game for the hosts. Jimenez did grab his first Fulham goal, but it just wasn't enough to inspire a comeback. And then we've got to Brighton Hove Albion versus Sheffield United. Now I predicted 4-0 to Brighton. It was actually a 1-1 draw. The points were shared at the Amex as Brighton continued their slump in form, now winless in their past 6 league games. Yikes. The hosts actually opened the scoring in the 6th minute through Adingra with what was a terrific run from him, to be honest, and they held firm for the majority of the game as well. Then Dahoud saw red, and the visitors made their man advantage count as the ball came off Webster and went in, giving the Blades a very vital point in their quest for Premier League survival. And then we move on to West Ham United versus Nottingham Forest. Now I predicted a 1-1 draw, but it was actually a 3-2 win for West Ham. It was a late winner that saw West Ham keep the 3 points in London. The Hammers opened the scoring within 3 minutes through Paqueta, who pounced on a loose ball that came off Sangare. Forest then equalised just before half-time through Awoniyi, and things were looking up going into the break. Elanga then put Forest ahead with just over an hour gone, but then it seemed like heads dropped. Forest took their foot off the gas and they paid the price. The hosts equalised not long after through Bowen, before a Lake Soucek strike sealed the victory in another 5-goal thriller. Very unfortunate. And then we move on to Liverpool versus Brentford. Now I predicted 2-1 to Liverpool. It's actually a 3-0 win. It was a comfortable win for Liverpool as they beat the Bees at Anfield. Brentford had a few chances, but it was Mo Salah who was there to open the scoring and put the hosts ahead. He then added a second in the second half before Jota well and truly sealed it for the hosts. The Bees didn't really offer much threat anywhere else, to be honest. It was pretty much all Liverpool after that. And then finally, we move on to Chelsea versus Manchester City. I predicted a 3-1 win to City. And it was actually a 4-4 draw. Yes, Chelsea are really doing bits for the league's entertainment this season as they've been involved in another brilliant match. Absolute cinema, to be honest. Haaland opened the scoring for the visitors before Thiago Silva drew the hosts level not long after. Sterling then put Chelsea ahead before Akanji equalised. Again, Crystal Palace Everton vibes from this one. Haaland added another as he put City ahead once again, but Jackson was there to level things up for the hosts. Rodri thought he had won it for City before Cole Palmer once again drew things level and inspired some beautiful words. City's boy is Chelsea's man! What a match, man. What a match. But yeah, those were my Game Week 12 Premier League predictions. As you can see, I got none of them right, so we're back to regular programming, it seems. But let's see if the little reset after international footballers, rejigged my football knowledge, and hopefully we get a few predictions right. We're just going to jump into it with the Saturday fixtures and the early kick-off of Manchester City versus Liverpool. It's a top of the table clash as Manchester City host Liverpool at the Etihad. City returned to the top of the league 2 weeks ago and have maintained their spot last week as well, despite dropping points to Chelsea. Liverpool have climbed up the table too and currently find themselves in second, just a point behind City, and level on points with Arsenal. Both teams have been enjoying some decent runs of form, with City having the better rubber of the green out of the two at the moment. City are performing well both domestically and in Europe, only recently dropping points in that thrilling draw to Chelsea that I mentioned earlier. Liverpool have also had a decent draw against Luton, but they lost to Toulouse in Europe. Going to France just to lose? Crazy. Both teams look to have been inundated with injuries, but at the time of recording, I don't really know how many of those injuries are actually legit long-term ones and how many are just doubtful and they'll probably be back for this game anyway. I'm not too sure, but yeah, quite a few injuries on both sides nonetheless. For example, we know that Robertson and Kevin De Bruyne were missing out for their respective sides, but will Haaland play? I mean, probably. But it could make for a more interesting matchup than usual with the possible 11s that could be concocted. I'm going to say 3-1 to City though. I think that despite the possible squad rotations we could see, I think Manchester City will claim all 3 points in this clash. Even after their shocking draw to Chelsea, City are definitely the stronger squad and have a strong depth in the multiple positions to really not make those injuries matter, to be fair. I mean, you can't replace Haaland, but you've got good players who could step into his role should that be needed, so, it's fair enough. Liverpool do have a good squad themselves, but their depth just isn't as good as City's, but it does they do have less injury problems at the moment anyway, so swings and roundabouts really evens it all out. Both teams are looking fairly evenly matched at the moment, but this City side are very good, and I do see them edging this Liverpool side on quality. The Etihad isn't exactly known for its atmosphere, but City look unplayable when they're at home, and I see that continuing here. And then we move on to Sheffield United versus Bournemouth. It's a relegation 6-pointer as the Blades host Bournemouth at Bramall Lane. Sheffield United find themselves in 18th, teetering on the edge of the relegation zone with just a point separating them and safety. Bournemouth are faring better, finding themselves in 16th, 4 points above their opponents and the relegation zone. Neither team are playing that well at the moment though, to be fair, with Bournemouth looking slightly better of the two, with 2 wins from the past 5 compared to Sheffield United's draw and a win. The hosts grabbed their first win over Wolves before earning a draw in Brighton, which is 2 very impressive matches in the last 2 games. Bournemouth grabbed a very impressive win over Newcastle. That was after getting dominated by Man City though, so, it is what it is. So, both teams are looking fairly matched at the moment in my opinion. I'm going to say a 2-1 win for Bournemouth though. I think Bournemouth will just edge it in Sheffield. The Cherries look like the better side at the moment, with Iraola looking like he's finally cooking something on the coast. The hosts are still suffering from a lot of injuries at the moment though, which makes their recent results look much more impressive. But even then, I don't see them being able to beat this Bournemouth side. The Cherries played well against Newcastle United and earned a massive 3 points in the process, but that is the Newcastle side suffering from a lot of injuries, so they weren't at their best, but it's still impressive nonetheless. I do see Sheffield United scoring and making this game close, but I think that ultimately Bournemouth have the quality to claim all 3 points, even away from home. Sheffield United haven't really shown much of anything really this season, so I don't really think Bournemouth will be too troubled, but you know, there'll still be a competitive match in there somewhere. And then we move on to Nottingham Forest versus Brighton Hove Albion. Nottingham Forest host Brighton at the City Ground, as both teams look to return to winning ways. Forest fell in the capital to West Ham as the Hammers came from behind to claim those very juicy 3 points. Don't know why I said they were juicy. They claimed the 3 points nonetheless. It was a disappointing result as Forest took their foot off the gas after going ahead, and will be looking to ensure that the same does not happen here. Brighton have not been enjoying a good run of form themselves, drawing 4 of their last 5 and losing 1, which is not good. It's not looking good for the Seagulls, and it seems like European football may be taking its toll. Saying that, while their domestic form has taken a hit, their European form is looking better, and they're currently second in their group, which is grounds to, you know, go through to the next round. So we'll see if the European football affects their league position. It normally does for teams like this. Oh yeah, let's not mention the massive amount of injuries that Brighton are also suffering from, because by God, it's good to be the team with the least amount of injuries in this clash. I can't lie, especially after last season, because those are some tough times, man. But with things pointing in Forest's favour, that normally means we are going to bottle it. So I'm going to say 3-1 to Forest. Despite Forest being perennial bottlers, I think we'll keep all 3 points in Nottingham. Forest are a different beast at the City Ground, unbeaten 8 league matches, and we've truly made that ground a fortress on Trent's side, and I'm all for it, man. I love the City Ground, I love the atmosphere. We just cook, you know, we just cook at the City Ground. As I mentioned, Brighton are going through somewhat of an injury crisis at the moment, with a lot of their more important players set to miss out through injury. Forest do have a few injuries of their own, but it's nowhere near as bad as it is for Brighton though, which is thumbs up from me. I'm very happy with that. Despite their slump in form, Brighton will still be a very tough opponent for us, and I'm sure they'll score a goal because this is what they do. But I see Forest being able to keep Brighton largely quiet and also keep those 3 points in the East Midlands where they belong. Come on, boys, I know we can do it. Come on. Come on. And then we move on to Burnley versus West Ham United. It's a claret and blue clash in Lancashire as Burnley host West Ham United. The hosts have not been enjoying a good season so far, currently found themselves rock bottom of the league, and this is even after Everton have been deducted points. Do you know how bad you have to be to still be bottom of the league after a team has lost points? After a team's points have been taken away and they're still above you? That shit's crazy. What is Vincent Kompany cooking? West Ham, on the other hand, have been enjoying some much better results than their opponents, ending a bad run of form with that win over Forest just before the break, currently found themselves in 9th. There was a lot of positivity surrounding Burnley's return to the Premier League under Vincent Kompany, but so far success has not come with that buzz, and they've just not clicked. It's just not clicked for the Clarets. Now this is likely down to the large number of players they brought in over the summer, and getting those players, you know, playing together, gelling together, and obviously the results will come after that. They do have good players, they just need them to click if they want results to turn around. West Ham don't have such an issue. Those 2 wins on the bounce will be good for squad's confidence, and I think going forward, you know, that's what you need. You need some confidence to really, you know, get the boys going. I'm going to say 2-0 to West Ham. I see the visitors taking the points back to East London. West Ham are a good side with a wealth of good attacking players, and I see them causing Burnley a lot of problems. That's even without their top scorer Bowen, who is set to miss out on this clash after an injury picked up on international duty. We're not completely sure yet, he could still show up. They're going to be assessing the situation, but it's looking like he might be missing out, which is good news for Burnley. Burnley do have a few injuries too, but neither side are going through an injury crisis at the moment. You know, not massive players are missing out. I guess Bowen is quite a big player for West Ham, but they've got other players who can score goals, right? Burnley have not shown a lot of threat going forward this season, and I haven't seen anything that would fill me with confidence that they could cause issues for West Ham. I see the Hammers taking the 3 points back to East London. Should be a fairly easy job for them. Just Burnley, man, they don't really show any threat whatsoever. I don't know what to say, man. They're just not. They're not cooking. I'll put it that way. And then we move on to Luton Town versus Crystal Palace. The Hatters host Crystal Palace at Kenilworth Road. Luton Town find themselves just outside of the relegation zone after Everton saw their points get deducted, but that doesn't mean they're safe just yet. I mean, we are only 13 games into the season, so of course they're not safe, but you get what I'm saying. Palace find themselves in 13th, 9 points above their opponents, but are experiencing a slightly better run of form than the Hatters are, grabbing a win and a draw in their last 5 matches, whereas Luton only grabbed 2 draws. but they were very impressive draws, I must admit. Luton have shown that they can make Kenilworth Road a very tough place to go. Most recently, it being the scene of that very impressive draw against Liverpool, which they were actually ahead for a chunk of that match. The bigger the team, the harder they seem to find it at Kenilworth Road. It'll be very interesting to see how the likes of Man City play when they visit, because that'll be a spectacle. Oh my god. Both teams also suffering from quite a few injuries, but Palace's injury crisis has gotten better in recent times. I remember earlier in the season they weren't fielding the best 11, shall we say, but they looked to turn that around with a lot of players have been returning and over the international break as well. It's a good time to get players back into the fold. Luton, on the other hand, are suffering from more injuries than the Eagles, but that hasn't really affected their results so far. I mean, that aforementioned 1-1 draw against Liverpool is especially potent because they still have those injuries then. So it's very impressive of what they're cooking. I'm going to say a 1-1 draw. I can see the teams sharing the points in Bedfordshire. This is the first time that either side has met since 2007, and at that time Palace ran out victors at Selhurst Park. Both sides have experienced much different trajectories since then, but it's led both of them back to the Premier League and for this clash. Luton are a much better side at home, shocking commentary, I know. I do see the Kenny helping Luton over the line once again. We've seen Kaminsky and Johnston making some brilliant saves for either side this season, so they're going to be keeping their team in the match more than I think people will give them credit for. But you know what? It should make for an interesting clash. It's not going to be any Chelsea-Tottenham or Chelsea-Man City, but it should be a very interesting clash between two sides which, look fairly evenly matched in some respects. Don't crucify me, Crystal Palace fans. I'm just spitting my ball knowledge. It is what it is. And then we move on to Newcastle United versus Chelsea. Newcastle United host Chelsea at St James's Park, with each side looking like the waiting room at an A&E. This really is the NHS derby. Both Newcastle United and Chelsea are saddled with injuries at the moment, but the Geordies may be the only side that is currently worse off than Chelsea at the injury front. Both teams have also been enjoying the exact same league form as well, both teams winning 2 and drawing 2 of their last 5, obviously in different orders, but same results. Chelsea have been enjoying an uptick in form recently as Pochettino is starting to look like he has turned around their fortunes and has got them picking up those all-important points. They currently find themselves 10th, slap bang in the middle of the table, with Newcastle just ahead of them in 7th. But they do have European football to contend with, so a fall off from last season is fairly understandable. Oh, and others injuries as well. I'm going to say 2-1 to Chelsea. Now I do apologise to my friends that support Newcastle. I do have a few of you, but I do think Chelsea will grab a result up north. As I've mentioned, Chelsea have seen their results turn around as of late, picking up those 2 wins and a very entertaining draw. It is really looking like a Chelsea renaissance at the moment. Newcastle have been having a great time of it recently, with their extensive injury list being a massive part of that. Their loss to Bournemouth was particularly egregious though, in my opinion. Even with their amount of injuries, they had some solid players in that lineup and they should have at least grabbed a draw. But no, they lost to Bournemouth, which is a bit embarrassing, I can't lie. But hey, glass houses, we've yet to play them yet, and I'm shitting it when we do. But the real impact of Newcastle's injury crisis could really be seen on that starting 11 from the Bournemouth game, and since then they've added Miguel Almiron to the A&E waiting list, it looks like, so it's really not looking good for the Geordies. I do think Newcastle will make things hard for Chelsea, especially at St James's Park, but I do see Chelsea being able to come out on top with those very important 3 points, and I see them heading back down south. It's going to be very impressive for Chelsea to get a win here, but I think they have it in them, especially at St James's Park. The atmosphere in that place is phenomenal, but I just think Chelsea will be able to edge it and, get those 3 points. They did the same against Tottenham. Bloody Nicholas Jackson scored a hat-trick. They drew with City. Now that was at Stamford Bridge, but still very impressive, and I think they'll grab a win against Newcastle as well. And then we move on to Brentford versus Arsenal. It's a London derby as Brentford host Arsenal at the Brentford Community Stadium. Brentford currently find themselves just shy of the top half, only 11th place on goal difference. Arsenal currently find themselves in 3rd, only behind Liverpool on goal difference too. Curious. Both teams have been enjoying similar runs of form recently, with both sides picking up 3 wins from their last 5, which is pretty solid, pretty respectable, with Arsenal picking up an extra draw on their opponents. However, unlike their opponents, Arsenal have European football to contend with as they look for a successful return to the Champions League. It's possible we could see some squad rotation from Mikel Arteta because of that, as I imagine their focus will probably be more on, getting out of this group than beating Brentford. But hey, you never know. They have a dog called win after all. Both teams are experiencing a very similar amount of injuries at the moment, with either side missing a couple of important players like Odegaard. Could he be back for the Brentford match? Possibly. We don't know just yet, but it's a very interesting time for the amount of injuries that are being accrued in this league, man. It's fucking insane. This is like the highest rate of injuries in any Premier League season so far, if I'm not mistaken. They put some of that on Twitter, man. I don't know. I just know that we've had a lot. Despite all that, though, I'm going to say 2-1 to Arsenal. I think Arsenal will take the 3 points in this London derby. I do see it being a hard-fought clash between either side, but I think that ultimately Arsenal will come out on top. Despite Brentford being Arsenal in their iconic Premier League debut, they haven't been able to recreate that feat in any of their 4 meetings in the past. So I think you know, that match against Arsenal, you know, Brentford's first match in the Premier League was a thing of beauty, and they've just not managed to recreate that against Arsenal since. But they did also beat Manchester United, which was also a thing of beauty. So Brentford just providing absolute vintage football games, you know. This match will see Ramsdale retake his place between the 6, as Raya is ineligible to play against Brentford. And he's going to want to put in a good performance to really give Arteta some food for thought and to really, you know, stake his claim to that #1 spot, which Raya has just ripped out from under him. That is insane. It'll be interesting to see how he performs after many matches on the sidelines. Even there's a video clip going around that he finds it hard to focus on football matches, which is not what you want to hear from your goalkeeper. So if there's no birds on the pitch, he might be okay, but you never know. It's going to be an interesting one to watch Ramsdale in this fixture for sure. It's going to be a tough match for the Gunners, but I do see them claiming all 3 points. And you know, I hope Ramsdale has a good game, because he's not a terrible keeper. He's not a bad person in general. He's actually quite likeable, but he did get his #1 spot ripped from right under his feet by Aloni. That's insane. And then move on to the Sunday fixtures and Tottenham Hotspur versus Aston Villa. Spurs host Villa in North London, but would be wishing the international break could last a bit longer with their current injury crisis. Tottenham's time at the top of the league finally came to an end a couple of weeks back, and that has seen them slide down the table since. Find themselves in 4th, 2 points behind league leaders Man City. So it's not the end of the world, you know. If they win, they can go top, but they gotta hope City don't win as well, and neither do Arsenal or Liverpool. So they could go back to the top of the league. There's a slight chance they could do it. Villa find themselves in 5th, only a point behind their opponents, and unlike Spurs, have not been swamped by injuries or suspensions. Both teams have been playing some good football under their new managers. Well, I guess Emery's not really new, he was here last season, but Ange is new, in case you're living under a rock. But they both look to play attacking football and have succeeded for the most part, which is reflected in their, you know, league positions. It looks like Spurs' issues have mostly stemmed from that thrilling match against Chelsea, which also dealt Spurs their first loss of the season as well, seeing 2 reds and a boatload of injuries. But that game was really the turning point for Tottenham's season, it feels, because they've just not looked good since. And I know they've got like 10 bajillion players out injured, but still, you lost to Wolves, lads. Come on, what's going on? That has cost them, but I'm going to say a 1-1 draw. I think that despite their very extensive injury list, I can see them holding on for a draw against Villa. This Villa side is a very potent attacking one, scoring 29 goals this season, which is compared to Spurs' 24. So they're definitely the more prolific of the two sides, but if they get kept quiet, man, they're very ineffective. We saw that when they played Nottingham Forest. We kept them quiet and they couldn't really do anything. So if Spurs can recreate some form of block for Villa, you know, not playing a very high defensive line, then maybe they can shut them down as well. I think that Spurs will be able to keep Villa quiet for the most part, but I do see the Villains being able to grab a goal too. It should be a very interesting clash in North London, you know, 2 attacking sides experiencing much different fortunes at the moment. That's got all it needs for a juicy match. Maybe not a classic like Spurs-Chelsea, but it should be a very good clash anyway against 2 fairly evenly matched sides who are putting in the performances, man, you know. It's going to be very interesting to see Emery ball versus Ange ball. I'm looking forward to it, to be honest. And the final Sunday fixture of Everton versus Manchester United. Everton host Manchester United at Goodison Park after being deducted 10 points by the Premier League for some dodgy financial dealings. I know Everton fans are planning some form of big protest, but you did break the rules, so you were going to get punished. But I get where they're coming from with the whole corruption side of things. You know, Man City and Chelsea still haven't been punished for the claims against them, but I do believe both teams are fighting it anyway, so that also kind of makes sense. Anyway, let's not talk about that. We're here to talk about Everton United. Everton currently find themselves in the relegation zone, second from bottom but level on points with rock bottom Burnley, who we lambasted earlier for still being below Everton. Manchester United haven't had any points taken away from them, but they do find themselves in 6th, just 4 points behind Villa, which is, I'd imagine, that's not where they'd want to be. United are nursing quite a few injuries at the moment, so their lineup is a bit more up in the air than would classically be thought of. But who knows what Ten Hag will cook, because sometimes he cooks and sometimes he really doesn't. I've seen some dreadful performances from his team. Everton, on the other hand, are only nursing a couple of injuries, and despite that points deduction, I think they're going to be cooking. I think they're going to be fired up. And I honestly think they're looking better than United at the moment, despite losing those 10 points. I'm going to say 1-0 to Everton. I think Everton will beat United on Merseyside. United have been enjoying a better run of form than the hosts, winning 4 of their last 5 league matches, whereas Everton have won 3 and grabbed a draw 2. United have not been enjoying a much better success in Europe though, which could really weigh down on the squad. I mean, they lost to Copenhagen. Need I say more? Everton's performances have been good despite the points deduction that was hanging over them, and I think that this points deduction will just galvanise the squad even more and keep them picking up results. That just seems like the perfect thing for a Sean Dyche side. I can see them grabbing 3 points against United here. I think, just there's something in the air that's telling me that we'll see a Sean Dyche masterclass against United, the battle of the Boldies, and I think Everton will come away with a shock 3 points. And honestly, the United meltdown on Twitter is going to be phenomenal. We will be there. And finally, the Monday fixture of Fulham versus Wolverhampton Wanderers. We round off our week of Premier League action with Fulham hosting Wolves in the capital. Not exactly thrilling stuff, but should be entertaining nonetheless. The Cottagers currently find themselves in 15th, 7 points clear of the relegation zone, and at present, no risk of getting relegated, whereas Wolves find themselves in 12th and are currently enjoying a much better run of form than the hosts. Wolves currently have 2 wins and 2 draws from 5, whilst Fulham only have a win and a draw from their last 5, so actually considerably better, to be honest. I don't know why I downplayed that. Fulham have scored the second least amount of goals this season, tied with both Luton Town and Sheffield United. Not the best company to keep, I can't lie. At least they've scored more goals than Burnley. Wolves, though, have clicked under O'Neill and have scored 16 goals so far this season. Quite a bit better than what Fulham are doing, and I think their attacking talent just edges over the Cottagers, to be honest, but I don't know if that's a controversial take or not. I'm not really part of the Fulham or Wolves spheres. But both teams have also conceded 20 goals, so the defence could use a bit of work. But I think with the lack of goals from Fulham, I don't know if Wolves' defence has much to worry about, to be honest, which is why I'm going to say 1-0 to Wolves. I can see Wolves winning this clash in the capital. Fulham's main issue is scoring a goal, which, as can be seen from their low goal scoring tally this season, and I don't really think they'll be able to break down Wolves either, despite both defences being pretty much on par with the goals conceded. The biggest L for Wolves though is the absence of Pedro Neto, who is set to miss out for this clash, which is going to be a big miss for them, but Fulham will also be missing João Palhinha through suspension, who in my opinion has been their best player this season. I can't see Fulham really troubling Wolves much at all, to be honest, even at Craven Cottage, so I see the 3 points go back to the West Midlands. It's as simple as that. I think Wolves will grab another win. And yes, those have been my Premier League predictions for Game Week 13. If you have any of your own, please leave them down in the comments below. I do enjoy seeing what you guys are cooking up, seeing what ball knowledge is going on down there. But yeah, I've been O2GT. Hope you have a brilliant rest of your day, and I shall see you guys in the next one. Peace.